What's happening, everyone? My name is Jake. I make lifestyle videos and vlogs, and I just started a new series titled Real Chats with Jake, where I sit down with people in my community and we talk about conversations that are sometimes hard to talk about. Today I'm joined with Joshian Morales. He is a coworker of mine and a performer. He is a wonderful human being, and we're talking about the cancel culture within the Black Lives Matter movement specifically. So if that's something that you're into, please watch this video, stay to the end, see how you can help. Also, while you're at it, go ahead, like this video, hit subscribe, and most importantly, share this video if you find the content worthy of being shared. All right, with that being said, let's dive on into the video. Welcome back, everyone. Welcome to the third installment of Real Chats with Jake. Today I am sitting down with Joshian Morales. He is a coworker of mine. He is honestly like a brother to me. I'm like the annoying little brother at work sometimes, I think. We have really good conversations in the dressing room about everything and anything. And one of the reasons I brought him on today was because we have such good conversations. And I think good conversations means someone that also gives you another side of things. And we don't always see the same point, and I think that's so valuable. And like, I'll be talking about, I think I need to go to Atlanta this weekend, and Josh won't be like, no, I think you need to save your money. Like, it'll be really like just good fun conversations, but always end with a very, very good message. So I appreciate you. Welcome to this channel. Thank you so much for coming on. I really, really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, of course. So we have a lot to talk about, and I don't want to waste any time. So let's just dive right into the video. The first question that I have asked everyone thus far is to start with, what is racism in your own words, if you could define it?
Yeah, I was trying to come up with a definition, and I think that the definition for me that I keep coming back to is this inherent learned behavior that anybody, but right now specifically we're talking about our white allies and Black lives. And so white people who have this inherent behavior that they've learned, that they've had passed on from their past generations, and how that allows them to perceive people, to treat people, to discriminate against people. And I feel like, well, and I say inherent, but I also kind of stop myself. I was thinking about this earlier, and I was like, should I use the word inherent? I think maybe more ingrained is probably a better word.
Yeah.
Because inherent suggests that it's a permanent behavior and you can't change it.
And that it will forever be passed down. Yeah.
Right. Where I think ingrained is probably a better word, where you can probably kind of buff it out if it is ingrained into something. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah. I keep going back to, we talked about it a little bit before, but I keep going back to like what Brandon said in the first dialogue session that I had was, it's like opening a door for someone. Like, that is a learned behavior. And that is the opposite of racism. It's a pleasantry. It's a greeting. It's a salutation, if you will. And we've learned that. And that analogy has really stuck with me. And I've never really thought about it like that. It's like, you just think, oh, we're born the way that we're born, and then these are my views. But no, your views are because of your upbringing and the way that you were raised. So I couldn't agree more with that. And that seems to be like a through line through the past three conversations, is it's a learned behavior. So if it's learned, that means that we can unlearn it, or we can learn to do something better.
Right. So acknowledging it. Yeah. And I also do think that sometimes it is conscious, and sometimes it can be subconscious. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So regardless of whether it is conscious or subconscious, how you make somebody feel, that doesn't change how it makes them feel. So, but I do think that it's worth noting that it can be subconscious. You can come from a family that was taught to see the value in every single life, but because of the privilege that you might have, because you are part of a white family coming from generations of white families, that behavior, that ingrained behavior that started back
Right.
at the beginning of our country has been passed down, whether you know it or not.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think that is the narrative that is being, displayed right now. And that's, I think, at least I can only speak for myself, but as a white male, that is something that I didn't, I didn't identify with. Like, I have always been, surrounded by with people of so many different ethnicities, religions, sexual orientations. So I've kind of like immerse myself into just like accepting everyone because that's the life that I live and the profession that we have and whatnot. But it's very eye-opening to be like, no, like my grandparents, my great grandparents, like they did raise my parents and my parents raised me and they were great people, but there have been just from their parents have been this passed down, just like in any culture, and that is something that we once we can recognize that, that's when we can start rectifying stuff like that. So
Right.
thank you so much for that. That means like I think that is worded so perfectly, and it really is bringing a light to what racism is and how we can fix it. So I appreciate you saying that. With all of that, I want to go into like one of the conversations that we're going to dive into, and that is cancel culture within specifically within the Black Lives Matter movement. We have seen within the past few days and weeks companies either coming out, CEOs coming out, politicians and generals coming against what is popular belief or what has been the normal up until this moment. And we've seen it on both sides. We've seen companies say, nope, we're not going to tolerate this. And then we've seen companies and CEOs that double down and say, no, this is our view. So I want to give you the platform, especially we're seeing this in our community with Broadway and casting. And Jay last week talked about some of the dialogue that was being said in casting, not just here, but like all over the world. So do you want to give me a little insight on how you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a distinction between canceling a platform that somebody has, or canceling the opportunity for a person or a company or an entity to be able to influence other people, versus canceling somebody as an individual, with note asterisk, without giving them the opportunity to be educated. And I say that sort of cautiously because people are tired. You know what I mean? There's, especially Black people, have been dealing this for their whole lives.
Right.
So it's a matter of acknowledging that they have been dealing with this for years and years and years, and acknowledging that they might not want to take headspace from where they're at the moment and be responsible for educating somebody else. And I'm not necessarily advocating for that. I'm just, especially in a world where mental health is such an issue and it's such a big thing, right. I think we should all just be aware of the difference between canceling somebody because of the platform that they have, the influence that they have, right. the ability that they have to sort of spread a negative message, mm-hmm. versus canceling somebody or something just because they were wrong, but they haven't been called out on it and they haven't apologized.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And what we've talked about prior, to this video and in other videos that I've done is the apology is the starting point. So I think a lot of these people of fame or have some sort of influence on society. I mean, we see it even without being famous. We see it with the Black Square for Blackout Tuesday. Like, people felt pressured into doing that, and maybe they didn't want to do it. And if they didn't do it, then maybe they felt, well, if I don't post this, then like I'm gonna be looked at as racist. But then there are some people that did it and they used the hashtag Black Lives Matter, and then that was a whole movement in itself of saying don't use the hashtag because that blacks out valuable information to this movement. So coming from a white perspective, I can understand where people are scared to say something because on both sides there's one side that has been oppressed for the entire history of our country, and then the other side saying I want to help you but I don't know how to help you without offending you. And that's kind of where these conversations started, is just having a dialogue, talking about things that aren't comfortable to talk about. But I agree with you. I think that cancel culture is such a reality kind of term that we now live in, whether it's whoever is, in charge of the White House, and whatever it may be, it has trickled down into our society. I mean, even before politics got involved, it was our upbringing, reality TV, the Kardashians. Like, everyone has a phone, everyone has a platform now, and when you say one thing, it can ruin you. I think I agree with you completely on the sense of mental health is such a very important thing, and if you have a platform and you say something wrong, you should be held accountable for your actions. However, we shouldn't judge people just off of that one thing and say, well, you said this, now you're done forever, I'm not gonna, accept your apology. I am seeing, for example, Drew Brees. He said what he said. He came back and said, I made a mistake. Okay, so now what are you going to do about it? He has continued to issue statements. He's continued to go against people that have, been his base too. That's a starting point. I mean, he still has a long way to go. I now will disagree with the sense of, like, I think sometimes it is necessary to cancel someone when you look at someone like the CEO of CrossFit. When you double down on something that is wrong, and in your heart is going to get backlash, but you still do it anyway, that's where I feel like it's not forgivable. Now let me ask you a question. So there's been a lot of things about funding, corporations and companies funding Trump, and with all of this happening, politics aside, do you think, this was happening before the Black Lives Matter movement, especially with Chick-fil-A and, donating to anti-LGBT foundations. Do you think that you boycotting or canceling Chick-fil-A, McDonald's, Taco Bell, these companies, do you think that is a positive way of protesting, or do you think that really makes a difference?
I do think it's a positive way of protesting, because that entity, that company, in an ideal world, with that canceling out of that, or boycotting, protesting, whatever, that, let's say Chick-fil-A, for example, and they see an actual dent in numbers, they're going to reassess.
Right.
It's going to make them think, you know what I mean?
Right.
And I think that's the whole point of what I'm trying to say with, the awareness of cancel culture is we do have to move forward. Right. You know what I mean? And moving forward is acknowledging that, like that definition of racism, where it's right. An inherent or ingrained learned behavior. You have to actively commit to go against that. You know what I mean? And so to move forward, as the person, as the aggressor, you have to take responsibility for it and then commit to not do it again. And I think as a community, as allies, as a race, all races, then we have to hold those people and those entities accountable in moving forward in, okay, you slipped up, you said this. And again, I think there is a fine line of intent. I think it comes down to intent. And I think you can tell pretty easily if somebody's being authentic. We talked about this a little bit last night. It's like you can tell automatically. You feel it. You know what I mean? It's a feeling. And if that person, entity, company, whatever, politician,
Right.
isn't authentic, isn't saying the things that they're saying because they believe it is true, they're just
Right.
saying it to sort of stop the backlash, then
Right.
obviously the canceling, the protesting,
Right.
the boycotting is going to work. But yeah, there is a fine line,
Yeah.
and it's a very thin line that we're walking on, and I understand completely as a person of color, but also as somebody who has those learned behaviors as well.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like I want to be able to be called out and be responsible for what I said, but I also don't want to just because I said it automatically being not considered not an ally. You
Right.
know what I mean?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think the example that I go to a lot is Drew Brees versus Roger Goodell. One, you can tell. I mean, this is my opinion. People can disagree with me, but it's one is you can see a constant apology, a constant let me try to be better, let me learn better. I'm so sorry, apology, opposed to someone sitting in a chair with like a athletic shirt on reading a script. When you blackballed a player that was trying to be peaceful, but you ruined his career, and you know, and now you want to come out and be like, oh well, the NFL doesn't stand for this. It's
Right.
the intent behind it, not let me jump on this bandwagon so that I don't get shamed for not jumping on the bandwagon. So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I want to move on to a little bit back to kind of what Jay was talking about with casting and directing, and I I've seen it said, and I don't know what the way to fix it. I mean, obviously the way to fix it is to correct it and not do it. But this term of like quote unquote urban, I need you to act more urban. I think that was developed out of trying to be more politically correct instead of saying I need you to be ghetto or I need you to be black. But in that very sense, it is very derogatory. So can you speak on that, and really any little taboo things that have happened that you want to share?
Yeah. So specifically to the
Uh-huh.
urban note that has been said to me, I know has been said to a lot of people. Um, I think it. I know that it starts with who is saying it, right?
Yeah.
So if you are in a room as an actor, you go into a callback room. Let's say you have your material, you've prepared it a certain way. The breakdown is generic or is not specifically it says urban or whatever. It doesn't have any of those words in there.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to do your best to go in there and be prepared for that.
Right.
So then when you have an all white creative team in the room that is then telling you, okay, why don't you try doing this more urban? I think it's just the insensitivity of it, and the it's just the awareness of it. It's not there. You know what I mean? It's kind of hard to explain, and I think Jay did a really good job. It's basically you're asking me to be more ghetto,
right?
Because that's what you perceive a black person or black culture to be.
And I want to jump on that too. It's not even directed just towards people of color and black people. When I've gotten that term, I need you to be more urban. What does that mean? You want me to be more like on the streets? I don't know what that means because I don't live on the streets. I'm not born on the streets. I don't, and even on the streets, what does that mean? You know what I mean? So it's a very tricky situation too, because how do you direct someone when, I mean, I know specific examples of people directing shows that they're not a part of that culture of the show that they're directing, right? So how does that mean that they shouldn't direct it? Or if they are directing it, what background or education should they instill in themselves before they direct other people, like?
Yeah, I mean, I think as directors, like, there are a number of playable actions that you can give to an actor that isn't be more black or be more urban that is going to get the result that you think you want.
Right.
And so in you saying, be more black, be more urban, whatever you want from that, if it's a relaxed kind of situation, and that's what you're wanting to bring out of the actor, why not go that route as opposed to automatically seeing color, seeing race, and making that the qualifier in the scene. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And to your point of directors taking part of telling stories that aren't necessarily in their wheelhouse or in their culture or part of their fabric of being. I think theater is beautiful in the way that like we get to tell stories for a living. Like that is like the main goal for us, right? But I do think that there is power and that there is just a heightened level of realism when you have people of color who are presenting a show that is specifically about people of color. Right. I'm not saying that a white person can't direct Once on This Island or In the Heights or X, Y, and Z, and that they can't be good at it, but those people are going to be reliant on the black people in the show in order for them to be successful in the show. You know what I mean? Absolutely. It's not just because I'm a white director and I put you on stage, and because I put you there and because I'm helping you tell the story, automatically that's going to hold weight. No, I think the lives of the people that are in the characters are what's going to
ultimately
further the show.
Those are the people telling the story too, right? Like the director is not on stage telling the story. So I think I couldn't agree more, and I hope that from this point on we look at, like, you look at Shakespeare, like women weren't allowed to be in shows. And not saying that this is, going to change everything about theater, but I hope it does change a lot of things, especially with casting, especially with, contracts, especially with having a quota to fill, quote unquote, like those are terms that we have all seen in this community. And I'm not singling anyone out. It's just the way that the world has been, and now we have the opportunity to take a step back as directors, as casting directors, as performers. If I'm going to direct West Side Story, I'm obviously going to identify with the Jets because I'm white, and that's the way that I was raised. I mean, I'm not a Jet. I wasn't born in New York. I wasn't in a gang, but I'm going to identify with that, over the Sharks. But as a director or even a performer, it is my duty to tell the best story possible, to hear the Shark. Let me spend more time with the Sharks, the cast of the Sharks, so that I can understand, how do you feel about this? How do you feel about this line? Because then that gives me an opportunity to learn from your culture, your background, these people that actually are Puerto Rican. How do I learn from your culture? Because that is where this was written from. So now I can take that and be like, you were telling me about this story. Let's try this. Put yourself in that situation. And I think that is more beneficial, and hopefully, and correct me if I'm wrong, a better way to say achieve this tactic over saying be more urban. Or,
And I think also it comes down to having more BIPOC people or Black, Indigenous people of color in the room that are in the level or working with the director. You know what I mean? Because
you just said it's power.
Between, having that power and then being able to talk to your ensemble, to your cast, as opposed to having somebody who is part of your creative team and is able to challenge you in a way that an actor maybe can't challenge a director.
Right.
And I also do think that in theater there is hierarchy. You know what I mean? So even if you have somebody of color that's the choreographer or that's the music director or that's an associate director, they're not going to have the full authority that a director has. So I think it starts from the top, and I think the things that we've been hearing as people of color of like, oh, they went with this person because they wanted to be more diverse, or as opposed to maybe they were just more talented.
Right.
And I think, yes, that has been said and has been heard by actors, by the people that it immediately affects. But I do think that those things start with the casting directors and directors and agents and managers telling their white actors, this is why this happened.
Right.
And
it definitely trickles down, and it doesn't even just go through our community. We're seeing this in Wall Street. We're seeing this in Fortune 500 companies. You might have the greatest workforce in the team that is the working thing of the company, and they might be the most diverse group of people. But if you have a bunch of CEOs and board members that are all white, or even it doesn't even have to be white, all the same, culture, race, sexual orientation, they're all the same, it trickles down. So it doesn't matter how diverse that group of people is. If you have people up here, like you said, of power, it doesn't work. So we need to get those people to come back up to the top, and we need these people to surround themselves with people that are not like them. They don't look like them. They don't have the same ideas, because that's where things grow, and that's where change comes from. So
and that's a hard thing to do, because there aren't a lot of people of color in those positions.
Right.
And because of how our country was built, and because of the upheaval that people of color have to go through in order to get the same opportunities that our white brothers and sisters get, then it limits the amount of people that are able to reach that threshold. So I challenge white leaders, as well, and specifically people of color, Black leaders, to invest and to invest in people, right? And to also mentor those people that you see potential in, because I think that want to be at that level. So, for example, one of my dreams, one of my aspirations is to be a theater director. And so, however, I don't know that I'm going to get there unless I have some sponsorships and mentorship, and somebody invests in me. You know what I mean? I don't necessarily think that I need the help to get there.
Right.
However, I do think that it's important to acknowledge the privilege that certain people have, and to then acknowledge the lack of privilege that other people have,
don't have,
in order to make that playing field even.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. We talked about a lot of great stuff here. I want to ask you one final question. It is, I didn't really tell you this, so I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm going to. You have a beautiful, beautiful family. I know your wife, Kayla. Hi, Kayla. I actually knew Kayla before I knew Joshian. We worked together at Lulu, and you have a beautiful baby girl. My question to you is kind of a spin on the last question I've asked everyone, if you could give advice to someone, but I want to hear your words as a fairly new father, with a beautiful family. What advice are you going to give Amelia, and how are you going to take this movement and implement that into her education and growing up?
That's a really good question. And that's actually something, even though you didn't really tell me you were going to ask me that, that's something that Kayla and I have been asking ourselves, being new parents, to being new parents in an interracial couple, and then being parents to an interracial child. How do we approach these things? How do we educate her without scaring her,
right.
But also educate her to make sure that she knows what the absolute truth is. You know what I'm not sugarcoating things. Right. And I think I've been very lucky, and I think it's really a privilege that I have that my family being Puerto Rican, when I look at my family, I do see all sorts of skin colors, of features, of even cultures, really. So to have grown up with that has made me, I think, a very open-minded person. Not to say that everything wasn't, rainbows and butterflies, but because there is a lot of colorism and there is a lot of racism even within communities of color. But I think the advice that I would give to her, it would be to look at your family, look at what your family looks like. We have that privilege, that ability to immediately see how it affects people that we love, that not everybody gets to experience. You know what I mean? Sometimes it feels so far removed because you don't feel the effects of the Black Lives Matter movement directly on you. Right. So to her, I would say, look at your family, study your family. I think it's important to know where your family is coming from. My mom is half Black, half Puerto Rican. My dad is full Puerto Rican, but he's very much on the Spaniard side. So that's why he's very light with green eyes and almost blonde hair. And so to see what privilege looks like in our family, right, but also how we've been discriminated against because of that privilege, right, that even our own family has. Right. Look at how it affects us. You know what I mean? And then imagine how that affects the whole world. And I think it's also for us, it's just keep fighting the fight and keep, holding people accountable. I saw an awesome quote. I can't remember who posted it. It was on Instagram. It was Kiala Saddle, Seattle. She posted, most of you are now getting tired of all of the noise that's happening, that has been happening from the Black Lives Matter movement in the past 2 weeks. It's like, most of you are getting really tired and fatigued right now. But imagine that as the soundtrack of your life. Yeah. Sometimes it's really soft and you can barely hear it. Sometimes it's blaring. So I think that's a really beautiful picture to acknowledge that, for me, I've been very lucky that at very few times in my life, times that I can count on both hands, that sound has been blaring. But it's one too many times. Right. You know what I mean? Right. And I my heart, that's why my heart is with the Black community, and which I do, I do consider myself part of, because my family is part of my family is Black. Right. But I acknowledge that their struggles have been tenfold. You know what I mean? Yeah. And that's why it's our responsibility in this moment when they are hurting to be able to hold them up and to give their voices a lift. Yeah. And I think that's ultimately what we would tell Amelia. You know what I mean? It's our responsibility to do it.
Right. Joshian, thank you so much for coming on. This made my heart so happy. I love you so much, and I think that conversation that we just had is very, very valuable, and I think a lot of people need to hear that, whether that be, from people in this higher power to the people that are still, being oppressed. And it like you said, it is our job to hold people up that are being oppressed. And what Jay said and what Brandon said is, like, once you identify one thing as wrong, right now, Black Lives Matter, you start seeing the other things that are wrong. So it's just about being a good human being and supporting other human beings, because at the end of the day, we are all human beings. So With that, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate you, and we'll talk again soon, all right?
All right. Love you. Thank you.
Joshian, thank you so much for coming on and telling me your story and just talking about things that are really important to talk about right now. If you like this video, please go ahead, like it, subscribe, and share it so that people can get the word out and learn more about the Black Lives Matter movement. There are so many people right now that are scared to talk, but silence really is violence. So you sharing this video might help someone have a dialogue with someone like their family member or a friend that they don't really know how to start a conversation with. While you're at it, go ahead and check out my social media listed below. It has my TikTok, my Twitter, my Instagram, as well as a link to my website. I would love to hear your feedback on it, as well as comment below and tell me what questions you want me to ask in future interviews. That being said, I hope everyone is being safe. Please remember to be kind. And also remember, there is nothing to prove, only something to share. I'll see you guys in the next one.